Have you ever scrolled through social media and wondered if everyone else is secretly sitting on piles of cash while you're over here celebrating finally having 4 digits in your savings account? Maybe you're lying awake at 3 in the morning doing mental math about whether you'll ever actually retire, or perhaps you're that person who checks their investment app 17 times a day, hoping compound interest has magically worked overnight miracles. Well, today I'm going to pull back the curtain on exactly when most Americans hit the major net worth milestones that everyone talks about, but nobody wants to admit they haven't reached yet. My name is Nick, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time analyzing money, wealth patterns, and figuring out why some people seem to effortlessly build fortunes while others are stuck wondering where their paycheck disappeared to every month. If you're tired of guessing whether you're ahead or behind the curve financially, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps clear up the mystery. Here's something that might shock you about wealth building in America. Most people assume that reaching financial milestones is this perfectly predictable, linear process where everyone follows the same timeline. Graduate college at 22, get a job, save some money, hit 100,000 by 30, and cruise toward retirement with $1 million by 65. Spoiler alert, that's not even close to how it actually works. The reality is so much more chaotic, unpredictable, and frankly more interesting than the neat little charts financial advisors love to show you. Before we dive into the specific ages when people hit these milestones, let me ask you something. When you think about wealthy people, what comes to mind? Do you picture trust fund babies who inherited everything? Or maybe tech entrepreneurs who got lucky with the right startup at the right time? The truth is, most millionaires in America are shockingly ordinary people who just happen to understand a few key principles that apparently nobody teaches in school. They didn't win the lottery or marry rich, they simply figured out the game earlier than everyone else. Understanding when most people reach these milestones isn't just about satisfying your curiosity, though that's certainly part of it. This information gives you the power to make better decisions with your own money. Think about it this way, if you're trying to get in shape, wouldn't you want to know what the average person weighs or how much they exercise? If you're trying to improve your grades, wouldn't you want to know how you stack up against other students? Money works exactly the same way. When you understand where you stand compared to everyone else, you can make informed choices about your spending, saving, and investing instead of just hoping everything works out. Let's start with the milestone that gets everyone excited, reaching $100,000 in net worth. For many people, this feels like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. It's that first major psychological barrier that separates people who are serious about building wealth from those who are just hoping their problems solve themselves. According to recent survey data from investment communities, the average age for hitting this milestone is just over 29 years old. But here's where it gets interesting. While the average is 29, about 95% of people who reach this goal do so by age 39, which means there's a full decade of variation in when this happens. Now, before you start feeling too good or too bad about these numbers, remember that this data only includes people who actually track their net worth and participate in financial surveys. In other words, these are people who are already more financially aware than the general population. The real average is closer to the mid-30s because plenty of people are walking around with negative net worth well into their 40s thanks to student loans, credit card debt, and lifestyle inflation. What makes reaching 100,000 so challenging isn't just the math, though the math is certainly part of it. It's the fact that you're doing most of the heavy lifting yourself. Unlike later milestones where compound interest starts pulling its weight, getting to 6 figures requires you to personally contribute the majority of that money through your own savings and smart financial choices. This is why so many people get stuck here. They look at their progress after a few years and think they'll never make it to the big leagues. The jump from 100,000 to 250,000 happens much faster than you might expect. And this is where things start getting interesting from a mathematical perspective. Most people who hit the $250,000 mark do so around age 33 to 35. That's right. It takes roughly 6 years to go from 0 to 100,000, but only about 4 to 6 years to add another 150,000 on top of that. The reason for this acceleration isn't magic, it's compound interest finally starting to flex its muscles. At this point, your investments are generating meaningful returns that get reinvested and start earning returns of their own. If you have $200,000 invested earning 8% annually, that's $16,000 in growth per year without you contributing a single additional penny. Suddenly, your money is working almost as hard as you are, and the psychological impact of seeing these larger gains can't be overstated. People start getting genuinely excited about investing when they see their account balance jumping by thousands of dollars each month instead of hundreds. Reaching $500,000 represents another major acceleration point, and most people hit this milestone somewhere between ages 35 and 40. This is where wealth building shifts from feeling like pushing a boulder uphill to watching it roll downhill with increasing momentum. The difference between accumulating your first 100,000 and your fifth 100,000 is night and day. By this point, if you're earning 8% returns annually, your investments are generating $40,000 per year in growth. That's more than many people earn at their jobs, and it's happening automatically while you sleep. Here's something fascinating about the 500,000 milestone. Survey data shows that roughly 1 in 6 American households, about 17%, eventually reach this level of net worth. That means if you make it this far, you're already in pretty exclusive company. More importantly, reaching 500,000 puts you on a clear trajectory toward becoming a millionaire, assuming you don't do anything catastrophically stupid with your money. The $1 million milestone remains the most celebrated wealth target in America, and for good reason. It represents true financial security for most people and opens doors that simply don't exist for those with smaller nest eggs. Research shows that most people who become millionaires do so around age 49, though there's significant variation depending on income, savings rate, and investment returns. Some high earners with aggressive savings habits reach this milestone in their 30s, while others don't cross the 7-figure threshold until their 60s. What's particularly interesting about millionaire status is how it's become more achievable over time, even accounting for inflation. The number of millionaires in America grew by approximately 1,000 people per day in 2024, according to recent data. Almost 25 million millionaires live in the United States today, which sounds like a lot until you realize that represents only about 12% of all households. So while becoming a millionaire is more common than ever, it's still relatively rare in the grand scheme of things. The jump from $1 million to $2 million happens faster than most people expect, typically taking about 7 to 10 years compared to the decades it took to reach the first million. Most people hit the 2 million mark somewhere in their mid to late 50s, assuming they started building wealth in their 20s or 30s. At this level, your investments are generating substantial returns that compound rapidly, making the second million significantly easier than the first. Here's where things get really interesting and honestly a little bit depressing depending on your perspective. The speed at which people accumulate wealth after hitting that first 100,000 is absolutely mind-boggling compared to the glacial pace of getting there in the first place. It's like spending 20 years learning to ride a bicycle and then suddenly discovering you can also fly. Let's talk about what happens after someone crosses that magical 6-figure threshold. The acceleration is so dramatic that it almost seems unfair to everyone still grinding toward their first 100,000. Remember how we said it takes most people until age 29 to hit that milestone? Well, reaching 250,000 typically happens by age 33 or 34. That means it takes roughly 6 years to accumulate the first 100,000, but only about 4 to 5 years to add another 150,000 on top of that. The mathematical explanation for this acceleration is compound interest, but the psychological explanation is equally important. When your investment account is generating $10,000 in returns during a good year, that feels pretty nice. When it's generating $20,000 annually, you start paying attention. But when your money is making $40,000 or $50,000 per year without any effort from you, something fundamental shifts in how you think about wealth building. People at this stage often describe a moment when investing stops feeling like a chore and starts feeling like the most exciting thing they do with their money. Instead of reluctantly setting aside a few $100s each month, they're actively looking for ways to increase their contributions because they can see the dramatic impact it has on their long-term wealth. It's like discovering that every dollar you invest today has the potential to become $10 in the future, which honestly isn't that far from the truth over long time periods. The jump from 250,000 to 500,000 follows a similar pattern of acceleration. Most people reach the $500,000 mark somewhere between ages 35 and 40, meaning it takes roughly 5 to 7 years to double their net worth from the $250,000 point. At this stage, we're talking about people who are generating substantial investment returns that compound rapidly. A $500,000 portfolio earning 8% annually produces $40,000 in growth without any additional contributions. Here's something that blows my mind about the 500,000 milestone. That $40,000 in annual investment growth is more than the median household income in many parts of America. Your money is literally earning more than most people make at their full-time jobs, and it's doing this while you're sleeping, eating breakfast, or binge watching Netflix series you'll forget about next month. It's passive income on steroids, and it fundamentally changes your relationship with work and money. The psychological impact of reaching 500,000 cannot be overstated. This is often when people start feeling genuinely wealthy for the first time, even if they're still working regular jobs and living in normal houses. There's something about knowing your investments could theoretically replace your salary that provides an incredible sense of security and freedom. You might not quit your job tomorrow, but knowing you could survive for years without a paycheck changes how you approach career decisions, negotiations, and life choices in general. From $500,000 to $1 million, the timeline typically ranges from 5 to 10 years, with most people hitting millionaire status around age 49. This might sound like it takes longer than the previous milestones, but remember that we're talking about doubling a much larger base amount. Going from 500,000 to 1 million means accumulating another $500,000, which is 5 times the original milestone that took until age 29 to reach. What's fascinating about millionaire status is how it's simultaneously more common and more exclusive than most people realize. With almost 25 million millionaires in America, you might think it's not that big of a deal anymore. But 25 million out of roughly 130 million households means only about 12% of families ever reach this level. So while it's more achievable than ever before, it's still something that separates you from roughly 9 out of 10 of your neighbors. The really wild part about becoming a millionaire is what happens next. The journey from $1 million to $2 million typically takes 7 to 10 years, with most people reaching this milestone in their mid to late 50s. But here's the kicker. That second million feels easier than the first 100,000 did decades earlier. When you have $1 million generating investment returns, you're looking at $80,000 or more in annual growth during good market years. At the $2 million level, something interesting happens that financial advisors love to talk about, but most people never experience firsthand. Your investment returns alone could potentially fund a comfortable retirement lifestyle. We're talking about potential annual returns of $160,000 or more, which is significantly higher than the median household income in America. You've essentially created your own personal money printing machine that works around the clock. But here's where the story gets really interesting from a generational perspective. The timelines I've been describing are based on traditional wealth building patterns, but recent research shows that different generations are experiencing dramatically different trajectories. Millennials in the top 10% of earners actually have 20% more wealth at age 35 than baby boomers did at the same age. However, the median millennial has 30% less wealth than the median baby boomer had at 35. What this means is that wealth inequality within generations has become more pronounced than the gaps between generations. The millennials who figure out the wealth building game early are accumulating money faster than any generation before them, thanks to technology, investment apps, and access to financial education. But the millennials who don't crack the code are falling further behind than previous generations did at comparable ages. Housing costs play a massive role in these generational differences. The inflation adjusted median rent for 35-year-old millennials is $1,481 compared to $1,251 for Generation X at the same age and $1,174 for baby boomers. Meanwhile, a 20% down payment on a median priced home in 2024 requires almost $86,000 compared to $69,000 for Generation X and $57,000 for baby boomers, all adjusted for inflation. These housing cost increases significantly impact the timeline for reaching net worth milestones because more income goes towards shelter expenses rather than savings and investments. Young people today are essentially being forced to choose between homeownership and wealth building in ways that previous generations never had to consider. Some are opting to delay homeownership to maximize their investment contributions, while others are stretching their budgets to buy homes and sacrificing their ability to build liquid wealth. The acceleration patterns become even more dramatic as people move beyond the $2 million mark. The third million typically accumulates faster than the second, the fourth faster than the third, and so on. This exponential growth is why you sometimes hear stories about people going from comfortable to incredibly wealthy seemingly overnight. They didn't actually get rich overnight, they just reached the point where compound interest finally overwhelmed their ability to spend money faster than their investments could grow. Understanding these timelines isn't just about comparing yourself to others, though that's certainly part of human nature. This information can help you set realistic expectations and make strategic decisions about your own wealth building journey. If you're 25 with $50,000 saved, you're actually ahead of most people your age. If you're 35 with $200,000, you're on track to become a millionaire in your 40s if you maintain consistent habits. The most important thing to understand about these wealth building timelines is that they're not set in stone. Your personal journey might look completely different depending on your starting point, career choices, and life circumstances. Some people inherit debt that sets them back years, while others inherit advantages that accelerate their progress. Some choose careers that prioritize fulfillment over financial gain, while others chase every dollar with laser focus. What's really fascinating is how external factors can dramatically alter these timelines for entire generations. Take millennials, for example. Those born in the late 80s and early 90s faced a perfect storm of financial headwinds that previous generations never experienced. They entered the job market during the Great Recession, accumulated record levels of student debt, and then watched housing prices skyrocket beyond anything their parents dealt with at the same age. Yet despite these challenges, the millennials who managed to crack the wealth building code are actually outpacing previous generations in some remarkable ways. The top 10% of millennial earners have accumulated 20% more wealth by age 35 than baby boomers did at the same stage of life. They've leveraged technology, investment apps, and unprecedented access to financial education to build wealth faster than anyone in history. But here's the cruel irony that keeps me up at night thinking about this stuff. While the top millennial earners are crushing it, the median millennial has 30% less wealth than baby boomers had at 35. The gap between those who figure it out early and those who don't has never been wider. It's like we're creating a financial caste system where your 20s and 30s determine whether you'll spend your entire life catching up or watching your money multiply effortlessly. The housing market deserves special mention because it's completely rewritten the rules of wealth building over the past decade. Previous generations could buy homes with reasonable down payments and still have money left over for investments. Today's young adults are forced to choose between homeownership and portfolio building in ways that seem almost cruel when you really think about it. Consider this absurd reality. A 20% down payment on the median American home now requires almost $86,000. That's enough money to generate significant investment returns for decades, but instead it gets locked into a house that might appreciate or might not. Meanwhile, rent prices have increased so dramatically that many people can't save enough to ever accumulate that down payment, creating a vicious cycle that traps them in the rental market permanently. So there you have it. The average American hits 100,000 by 29, 250,000 by 35, 500,000 by 40, becomes a millionaire at 49 and reaches 2 million in their mid 50s. But remember, these are just averages in a world where your neighbor might be secretly broke or secretly loaded. The real question isn't whether you're on schedule, it's whether you're actually playing the game at all. Start investing consistently, avoid lifestyle inflation, and let compound interest work its magic. Your future self will thank you, assuming you don't spend the next decade checking your investment app every 5 minutes like some sort of financial hypochondriac.